What's up, YouTube? Sergio Becerra II here again, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to be covering another book review. Since you've already seen the last two videos covering the Plantagenet dynasty and then the Wars of the Roses, I'm going to be covering another book. Well, it's not a history book. It kind of like levels down the rules with England and its kings. So if you remember my last video on the Plantagenet dynasty, I talked about King John and how his reign was just out of control and tyrannical, which later led to the barons drafting up a chart that limited the king's powers, known as Magna Carta, which is Latin for the Great Charter. So today we're going to be covering Magna Carta. It does not have an author's name, but it says with a new commentary by David Carpenter. So if you're from the UK, you're probably familiar with Magna Carta. Basically, it is the charter that limited king's powers, even though they still had absolute power, but their powers were limited, which later becomes the proper model for England to become a constitutional monarchy, which later becomes the inspiration for the United States to have the United States Constitution. Basically, this book lays out the rules and what limitations that kings can have. It does have the articles, and there's like it does carry the limitations. You see right here. It does have the articles that lays out the rules of which the kings and queens have to follow. And what's also interesting that it's also got both the English and Latin translation, which I'm holding right here, page 36 and 37, Magna Carta 1215. This was during King John's reign, but it also covers but it doesn't cover, it just doesn't cover I'm sorry, not only does it cover the articles of the charter, it also covers the history of how this charter was put to use. And I think, how many articles are there? I think there was more. Let's see. Oh wow. 61 articles. I mean, if you look at the United States Constitution, there's only 27 amendments, but the charter covers 61. That means the king's powers were really limited, and they had to follow it. Otherwise, the barons, which become the foundation for the English Parliament, would take any action against the king. For example, when it comes to the justice system in the UK, no man shall be put in prison or nor any way destroyed unless he is tried by the jury of his peers, instead of having the king or anybody else judge them. Not only that, taxes, because if you look back to King John and then later with his son Henry III, they couldn't tax at all without the barons' approval. Can't be just the king doing it himself. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to cover on these articles within the charter itself, but I'm not going to go through all of them. Like I said, there's 61. But then, of course, another thing, but it kind of does also talk about some monarchs that like didn't like really follow the charter whatsoever. And then you look at as I've covered, Richard II of England. Remember the peasants revolt. They didn't want to. They stopped paying taxes. They were fed up how they were being treated by Richard's own counselors, even though he was 14 years old at the time. So the charter is invoked. Everything's back in order. And then fast forward later on with the beginning of the Stuart dynasty, starting with James VI of Scotland, who becomes James I of England right after the death of Elizabeth I. He thinks, I've had absolute rule in Scotland for a long time. I should be able to do the same in England. So he starts taxing people for whatever reason. Then once James dies, he's succeeded by his son, Charles I. And of course, like his father, he thinks he can do whatever he wants by absolutism. He believed because like his father, they believed in the divine right of kings. He believed that Parliament was irrelevant. So anytime he wanted taxes, he just taxed them for whatever. For instance, you want to be part of a trade and you need a license, you have to pay a tax, and that you must do. And then, as, and then if you're not familiar with Charles I, he ends up being put on trial for treason, which he's like the first king to ever be tried on, because he started the English Civil War, which was between him and his own people. In other words, he was at odds with Parliament. Charles was put on trial for treason, which he thinks is which of course he doesn't recognize the trial nor Parliament. Of course, everything's irrelevant because it goes against the laws of God because he's the king. He's found guilty and is beheaded with an axe, which uh, which of course leads to the monarchy for like a good few. No, I shouldn't say the word good. For a few years, be made like turn into a commonwealth. And then you've got Oliver Cromwell, who becomes the Lord Protector of the realm, but in which his rule has been nothing more than a dictatorship, but somehow acts like a king, really. And then once he dies, he's succeeded by his son Richard Cromwell. Everything falls apart. Parliament proclaims Charles' son as king, Charles II. He comes back. The monarchy is fully restored. And then once Charles II dies and is later succeeded by his brother James II, which of course would be the last Catholic English king ever, because most of the time England has been a Protestant nation since Henry VIII. But history was tough on James II. Remember, they did not want a Catholic as their king, so things were like really bad. So things were like just troubling for him. He had a hard time trying to rule, and the only reason why James succeeded his brother because Charles II, even though he had children of his own, but they were all illegitimate with numerous mistresses, couldn't produce a legitimate heir of his own with his own queen. So once James dies, then you get the William of Orange, who becomes William III, who is actually a Dutch king. That's when Parliament decided, okay, we're gonna make you king. We're gonna start putting some further limitations on the monarchy. That's when the Bill of Rights of 1689, I think it was. That's the Constitution. That is the current Constitution of the United Kingdom today. And then, of course, as you're familiar with history itself, which would be the United States, when the first settlers came to this country from England to such as Virginia, which is in the east, they carried copies, handwritten copies of Magna Carta. So that way they remember what they learned from when they were living in England, and what uh, what new laws the people will be putting in place, which of course which of course they use Magna Carta, that you have more liberties than what a ruler does. And then they drafted their own charter, which is known as the Virginia Charter, and then of course later on, by the late 18th century, that's when the United States became a country of independence by fighting off against the United Kingdom under the Hanover dynasty and its King George III. So there you have it. And I do like the front cover because this is the actual charter itself, written on a long piece of parchment. That every article ever written, just if you can see, just squeezing that all up in there. But since this happened under John, so John's name by the Latin pronunciation of John is Ioannis. Ioannis, not King John, just Ioannis. John, King of England. That's how it starts off with, and what this charter and what Magna Carta was put in place for. But if you remember watching the Plantagenet video, John has the charter null and void by the Pope, which later causes a revolt with the barons, in which after John dies, it's later reinstated under John's son Henry III. So there you have it. And then on the back of the book, there's a quote from the charter itself. It says, "No free man is to be arrested or imprisoned or deceased or outlawed or exiled or in any way destroyed, nor will we go against him, nor will we sin against him, save by the lawful judgment of his peers, by the law of the land." So England's Magna Carta became the grounds not only for England to become a constitutional monarchy, but then lays down the grounds for the United States also to be an independent constitutional republic. So there you have it, Magna Carta, right here. So tell me what you think in the description. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell for future updates. I'm still going to be doing more book review videos and do as much as I can. Okay, so this covers this latest book review, Magna Carta. So take care now. Bye.